Visual hierarchy is a design technique used to present the content of a web product. You'll probably read this first, then this second, and then if you're at all interested, you go on to read a little bit more. So again, it goes the same for our print design. So when we do our posters or anything like that, oh my gosh, my mouse is going again. When we do our posters or anything like that, we always want to make sure our headline is the largest, highest contrast. I was going to say it doesn't have to be the largest, but yeah, depending on your font weights, how it stands out against a colored background, etc. So visual order allows for easier consumption of content by allowing the brain to recognize the level of importance for each element on a screen. So without even reading or thinking, you can already immediately see where the hierarchy is landing here. So rooting Gestalt, visual order is a useful technique when leading a user through a process. The experience a user has with the web product is greatly influenced by the arrangement and focus of content presented to them. So 2 ways to add hierarchy to your UI. So determining what part of the message requires focus and then giving it a priority is a task unique in UI. So again, you can see where the hierarchy is happening here. The main hierarchy elements are happening there. So component hierarchy, it's not just text. When it comes to getting a user to focus on a particular element, size obviously matters. So simply making an element larger will immediately draw attention to it. Whether it's text, images, or interactive elements, the order of what the user deems important can be easily achieved through variation of size. So this image is very large, but it's not competing with here because it blends very much with the background. There is some nice contrast here, but for the most part, you still very much see this. And then we see our orange button for learn more, and then our contact. Contrast, another big one. So lightness versus darkness of an element can provide dramatic focus. Contrast is a necessary component of accessibility. What is the acronym for it? AE, anyways, the acronym for like legally, you now have to
AODA.
Thank you. You legally have to have the proper accessibility, or your site will not even show up on Google. You'll get bumped right down to the bottom. So it must meet all of the accessibility standards. So again, contrast being one of the big ones. Contrast alone can allow some information to stand out while others take a back seat. Color can also provide visual order and relevance. Color can help provide meaning to elements as well. Red error message, green success icon. So as much as maybe we want to think outside of the box when it comes to, especially in web, kind of following the basic rules is really key. So you never really want to say, you know, your error message is in bright green, because if you say submit and there's an error and it just, your text comes up saying error, but it's in green, our brains immediately think at that second, oh, it went through because it's green. We already know that red is wrong. Time to, like, something went wrong, we need to circle back. So yeah, like I said, going outside the box is fun. But when it comes to things like that, we really need to just, you know, be like the sheep and go with the masses and do what is proper. So it's recommended to not use color alone to convey a message, as people with accessibility issues may not be able to interpret the meaning. Again, between red and green, stop and go. Proximity, where things are placed in relation to others, can draw focus. Elements are typically perceived as being in a group when placed close together. Placing an element just outside of that group can draw attention. And it's important to keep UI components like content boxes a comfortable and consistent distance away from other groups of elements. So always making sure we're grouping also the proper things in proximity. So we don't want to have our maybe submit button with our back button, you know, too far away from each other. Repetition, so creating patterns of similar UI elements can help visually organize your screen. Grouping information based on a unified theme or category is ideal when displaying large amounts of information. You immediately dare attention to an element if it looks out of place. If that is unintentional, your interface may be perceived as unorganized or even careless. So it's like, what kind of monkey did this one, right? White space, always key. With digital interfaces, white space helps define look and feel. So, okay, negative space, being generous with space around elements is an easy way to create a modern, clutter-free design. Apple is probably the kings at this, right? White space is also a design element. So it's like an image in there. Typography, big one. Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. We can see Happy Mother's Day is the key message. Amazing is another. And thank you is number 3. In an age where context is king, typography is the most significant way to communicate a message. We talk about this, and I use this example all the time, being, you know, if it's a Halloween greeting card, we're not going to have, you know, like a really script font, or maybe the opposite of that. You know, if you're doing a greeting card for your great grandma May, you're probably not going to have like a really spooky Halloween font. It's not really appropriate. Organizing typography of the same message on multiple screen sizes can be a challenge. So thankfully, users are accustomed to some unwritten rules about the order and nature of typographical cues and affordances. Sorry, there's like a lot of crashing going on in the background. Wondering what's falling. So our headline. So headline type allows users to scan through multiple headlines to help determine where they want to go. Most users of web products are less likely to slow down and consume every aspect of an interface. So our mind is essentially reading it much quicker than we're actually probably reading it. So when you're scrolling through, you're just getting little bite-sized bits. A headline is core content and a snapshot of the content to follow. So headlines are also used to entice a user to interact with the content. So when we have headline, now we have a subhead that gives you a little bit more information, allows the user to learn a little bit more about the content, and whilst not always used, they can explain a little bit more of the headline. A subheadline, kind of like a tagline too. So it dives a little bit deeper, not always necessary, but sometimes nice to have. Then when we add some body copy, and that's now the message. The body copy is the content the user has drilled down from the heading, and then potentially to the subhead. It's important to make sure the amount of body text is appropriate for the screen the user is on. Too much body text can be daunting, and you risk a user bailing. Lots of clients will want to have lots and lots of text on there. The funny part, it's usually the small businesses that want to tell their life story about everything, and they want to put every single ounce of information they've ever retained about their business on their website, and it's up to us as the professionals to steer them clear of that. No one's going to sit and scroll through all that information. So 8 ways to make your interface easier to scan. So the best way. So we always know that we start in the top left, we go across, we zing down, and then we go over, and then it continues on. Again, this isn't always the case. It's not exact, but for the most part, this is where the majority is landing. So based on popular eye tracking pattern results, it's been shown that people tend to scan most content in the Z pattern. Expanding on that Z pattern to a zigzag as it extends below that, as I mentioned. Placing the priority of your content based on this pattern allows for easier consumption. Make the top tops. So placing the navigation across the top of a page allows the user to easily scan categories. Place core content within the header to allow a user to understand quickly what you're all about. So this is where we remember perhaps touching upon last semester of, you know, that navigation being in, you know, like a really interesting, unique spot isn't always the best because we always want to just make sure that it's consistent. It's like the masses, so it doesn't get lost. So the call to action all the way. A clear call to action in the form of an interactive element provides a way for the user to act on their decision quickly. This may not be the first time a user has visited your site while doing research on a product or service, so make sure they can act on the choice. Going to download at the App Store or Google Play, and the shopping cart, always key. Legible and readable. Test your page to make sure content is easily readable. Play with the visual hierarchy to make sure your information can be parsed with minimal effort. Your typographic skills will be out to the test when it comes to displaying information on multiple screen sizes. That's where, when you get into that, always key to make sure that things aren't shrinking down too small. We don't always want to just take our desktop version and then size it down to mobile version and then calling it a day. Really thinking about, once you step away from it, if I step away from this, what do I see first? I see the world of plants. Then I see that plant name. That's I don't know the technical term. I know it's a snake plant. So what do you see next? I do see the shopping cart, etc. So making sure that you can see it yourself before throwing it out there. Sometimes small fonts are really, really nice looking and really cool, but not great for old folks like me. Number your numbers. So using actual numbers in your design provides focus. So using a number improves cohesion, and users, as users are in a constant state of assessing content. Use to equate numbers to data like facts, prices, and quantity. So it's nice, you know, ooh, we've got this many, or this many people have downloaded this. And you're like, that must be good. Highlights. Highlighting core information provides content scanning, making interactive elements. So text, links, buttons, etc. stand out is a way to encourage that interaction. So we could see right here, they probably don't want us to touch this button first. They're going to want us to hit the tracking first, or they know that as a user, they're going to want to just, oh, that's where you put your tracking number. That's your main element. Highlighting keywords and key phrases using bold text, color, etc. helps with digestion of the information. So same with like applying your contrast will help there. Imaginative images. So images help support content by providing a relevant visual for the user. Adding a visually appealing image supports brand experience. Adding an informative image breaks up the task of reading and parsing. So breaking up into like these little buckets of information, adding an image that's nicely related to that. It's not so daunting than a big giant page of text. Users typically comprehend images faster than text. So you're drawn to, perhaps in this case, the illustrations, which are really, really widely used these days in websites, especially when we get into these little bite-sized bit areas. Adding a nice illustration, perhaps icons, very much helps all that information get broken up. It helps with that quick scan of things. You're like, oh, that must be, you know, this kind of message, and that must be this kind of message. So not just being actual photographic imagery. Don't be afraid to add some illustrations, because they're also fun and quite unique. Whew. Does anybody have any questions in regards to that?